gears. Just something that's not going to get me killed. We got a former delegate, Robert Underwood, on the line, and we'll bring him on. Good morning, Robert. Oh, that's where you at here. There you go.
And I'm very interested in watching the video of Bree, so I can't wait to see it.
We're going to find it, and we're going to put it up.
Because I remember her as a brand new young reporter coming out to Guam.
Oh, so many years ago.
Yeah, so many years.
and then Dr. Underwood, please attend the Zoom Lasazo for me, because after I put that up, Sabrina's going to have some words for me.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Clean it up.
Right.
Clean it up.
7:49. Well, let's just get right to it. Over the weekend, there was just a slew of events related to our current Congressman Michael San Nicolas that came out. Well, first of all, there was a roll call article that came out and said that the investigation into these alleged ethics violations committed by San Nicolas was ramping up, and then we saw the ethics committee put out a press release about it. And then, of course, we had the story. You chimed in. We also got John Paul Manuel, of course, the congressman's former chief of staff and campaign chair, to also chime in. And we did receive a Facebook comment from the congressman. Where's that at, Bree?
It's in the news team chat sent by Tomas.
Okay.
I can get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, Dr. Underwood, we had reached out to the congressman by way of Facebook Messenger, which I still can't wrap my head around that we have a sitting. I mean, this is a high position. I mean, it's just as high as an elected governor. And you got it? Okay, yeah. So our response through KUAM, to KUAM from Facebook Messenger, Bree, what was it?
Quote, "This is just part of the process that we are required to go through in order to disprove the allegations made against us. We will continue to cooperate and thank the people of Guam for their patience and support during this time."
Okay, and we'll just ask Dr. Underwood, I guess, first question. Is this really just a part of the process? Is it totally normal to have a subcommittee formed to investigate our delegates?
Well, it seems to me that it's an additional step. I don't think that people just saying that, trying to make it sound like this is the regular process. Interestingly, in his posting, he says that he will continue to cooperate, when in point of fact, part of the new allegations against him is that he has issued false statements and that he is trying to obstruct the investigators. So apparently, maybe there's some people in the ethics committee who don't believe that he is cooperating, and of course that offers a new set of charges that he has to respond to. So this is not a normal part. I know it's to his interest to try to normalize it, but this is not normal. This is an additional series of charges. And it's not regular. It's not normal to appoint a subcommittee, a special subcommittee to investigate. Right. It's just not normal.
Yeah, and you know, I tried to think back because I remember there was something Tomas had asked about, has this ever happened before? And with Congresswoman Madeline Berdallo, I recall there was also a House ethics investigation, I guess you could say, or complaint that was filed against her, but I don't recall if it went to that next level with the subcommittee.
I don't believe it did. I don't believe that they created an investigative subcommittee, and I don't believe the charges here, even the charges against the Congresswoman at that time, concerned her behavior in office. And some charges relative to where she was staying when she came to Guam, but none of those charges were that she was obstructing the investigation. Right. That I think people have to kind of wrap their head around that a little bit.
Yeah, no, and I think maybe they might be having a hard time with it, Dr. Underwood, because in his response to us, Congressman San Nicolas conveniently didn't mention that. And I'm just going to read from the statement of the chairman and ranking member of the House Ethics Committee, and this is a statement that they had put out. And I'm going to clue in on the part that we're discussing. that they've established an investigative subcommittee that is going to investigate whether or not the delegate also made false statements to government investigators or agencies, improperly interfered or attempted to interfere in a government investigation of related allegations in violation of House rules, law, regulations, or other standards of conduct. Like you said, I got to think this is probably the biggest development. I mean, the formation of the subcommittee, I mean, that's huge, but that they formed it and they also are now seeming to imply to us that they think that our congressman tried to interfere with this. How huge is that, Doc?
Well, I think it's very huge. It's been many instances where, of course, in many times the cover-up is equal to or worse than the original offense, and so this is this smacks of that, and it's very it's elevated. It's very serious. You don't lie to investigators at your own risk, your own peril, and so I'm pretty sure that they must have some evidence to proceed along those lines, but I think the main point for me is that he owes us an explanation. He owes the people of Guam an explanation. I don't think it's he can't simply be allowed to not engage on this issue by saying it's not it's a normal part of the process when everything points out that it's not normal and that there are new charges,
right,
and that he hasn't been on Guam I guess since January or February, and that's sad. It's very sad. I was just talking to Amata Radowagan over the weekend. Amata Radowagan is the delegate from American Samoa,
right,
and she makes it a point to go home every month. And because the pandemic hit, she has been tested 5 times. She spent 14 days in quarantine in Hawaii, spent an additional 14 days of quarantine in American Samoa, and she tells me just so she can be at home with her people. Mm-hmm. That's what leadership is. Mm-hmm. You're at home with your people, and she's now in the midst of quarantine in American Samoa, and there is no flight between Hawaii and American Samoa, so she had to hop a FEMA flight. Mm-hmm. So
wow,
that's like the absolute evidence of what it means to be close to your people and also responsible to your people.
But what would be your response, though, if he were to say that, he needs to be in Washington, D.C. to fight for our people, to ensure we get federal funds? To ensure
the territories are included in these measures.
That legislation is already on the move. There's very little committee activity. There's no House session until the end of this month. At any point in time, he could have come home in the past month or so. He could have gotten COVID testing, because I know that the House attending physician, which is the doctors that are from Walter Reed that are assigned to the House of Representatives, provide that COVID testing. So in any event, that's his call. But the reality is, it's sort of immaterial to me what his response is. It's more like, why doesn't he open up and give us an accounting?
Right.
And people have to understand that and I know it's a very painful process for him. I feel very badly for him and his family and those that are close to him. But him being wounded in this way is not just him. We're all wounded because our representation in Washington, D.C. Will suffer because of this. Mm-hmm. It's inevitable.
It is.
That people are not looking at him the same way that they used to.
You brought up something in your interview with Tomas Manglotnia that I really focused on, was talking about how the national media reports on Delegate San Nicolas. And you were right, it's never anything good. I mean, there was a whole story about his spending, his office budget, and it wasn't a positive one. There was also stories about him not showing up for work, having the second worst voting record in the House of Representatives. the obvious ethics scandals that we're now seeing play out. How's that? And again, I mean, people are going to say you're hating, but it's just not a good look. I mean, the only positive news that we see about the congressman is when he posts about himself on his Facebook.
Pretty much, you know, his attendance record and his spending habits and all that are certainly not positive. And when you look at all the national press that he's received, it's all negative, and maybe some of it is sort of neutral, but it's all negative. And you know, you can argue that people in Guam are out to get you, but there's nobody in Washington D.C. that should be out to get him. I mean, what would be the point?
Right.
He's really drawn attention in a very negative way. And of course, the point is that the quality and the capacity, the quality of his service and the capacity of his office to influence legislation is affected by this.
Right.
And that's just a straight up point. It's not a, you know, you can deny it, you can say it's not true, but human beings are human beings, and they're reacting to each other in light of this. Can you imagine if you get a phone call from his office and to a federal agency or to another member of Congress, you know, how that call is introduced to the official? They'll all kind of recognize that this is the kind of what is swirling around about him. And this affects us. That's the point.
Let me cut in, guys, real quick. We're KUAM FM in Agutnia, Guam. I-94, Guam's favorite. It is the KUAM News takeover of I-94. It's containing COVID. And on the line right now, good morning to our KUAM TV 11 viewers on the line right now. We have former delegate Robert Underwood, and we are discussing the formation of a House of Ethics subcommittee specifically formed to investigate our current sitting Congressman, Michael San Nicolas.
I wanted to say, I remember at the beginning of this, when all the allegations first came out last year, you know, he did issue a response. I think it was on his Facebook page, and he was saying how this was a dirty politics, baseless allegations, and that there was an active FBI investigation into GovGuam officials. Again, that was September of last year.
Yeah.
But looking at what's happened now, I mean, what's your reaction to it?
And how, Doc, if you could, this went to the OCE first, right? And this Office of Congressional Ethics, they kind of really go into the weeds of the allegations and vet it, and you know, see if there's anything there for the Ethics Committee to investigate. So, what Sabrina said, and then also couple it with how key and how revealing was it that the OCE decided to pass this on, and the subcommittee took it.
Right. It's important to understand, and I don't. Again, I want to stress how badly I feel for him. But what he has said, what he said last year, was that he was aware of FBI investigations against local officials and that they engaged in some kind of plot. Given that latest series of allegations made by the House Ethics Committee about him, he's the subject of federal investigation because he's the one that's obstructing the investigators. He's the one that is alleged to have given false statements. So that's an ironic twist of events for him. And you're absolutely right, Chris. They have an OC, Office of Congressional Ethics, which sort of vets charges against members of Congress, and they sort of vet whether there's anything there to further look at and refer. And in this particular instance, they don't need a whistleblower. It's not like somebody came ahead and said, we're telling this to on this individual. OCE will look at media reports, maybe some of your media reports from KOAM, I don't know, but they look at media reports, and then they decide that there's something here to look at, and then once they start looking at it, then they decide to refer it. So, and then they bring in the people. Then they brought in people to interview, and so I'm sure that all the people that have been interviewed that used to work for Congressman San Nicolas, or maybe even currently work for him, have already made statements.
Doc, if you work for the congressman, right, and he makes you sign a NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, and then you're approached by investigators looking into these allegations, are former staffers allowed to breach their non-disclosure agreements? Because we hear that Congressman San Nicolas makes his staff sign these things. And I'm just wondering, does that prevent them from disclosing anything at all to these investigators?
Not a violation of the law or a violation of ethics. A non-disclosure agreement is like proprietary information. You know, it's like you work for a company and you make pharmaceuticals, and you agree that you can't disclose anything about your work regarding pharmaceuticals. But if someone is stealing money, that NDA doesn't apply.
Because I had reached out to a former staffer, and the former staffer had told me that he wasn't allowed to go on the record because he had signed an NDA, and that he'd actually been threatened by the congressman that, if you say anything, then you sign that NDA. So I'm just wondering how much of a chilling effect it has.
You know, I mean, you think about the other guy who gets everybody to sign an NDA is Donald Trump. And look at how many people are talking there.
Doc, what do you make of this? I feel like a lot of, and there was a comment here, in other words, Michael San Nicolas dug his own grave. I kind of agree with that a little bit, in that the congressman has routinely ignored the media. He only engages with friendly media. In fact, I think there was an interview I saw with him a couple months ago, and it was basically that, this ethics stuff was thrown out. There was nothing to it. He was going to be cleared, which is exactly opposite of what happened. So how damaged is a congressman in that he stays on Facebook? He doesn't really venture out. He does these, like, we ask for a statement on something huge like this, and we get 2 sentences. So how much could he help himself by making himself available and, let's say, doing, it's crazy. This all happens. Hey, Doc Underwood, can we do a Zoom interview? Sure. I mean, it was so easy. But with Congressman San Nicolas, I mean, how easy would it for him to be, let me answer the questions and let me deal with this?
And we've tried.
I mean, Lord knows.
I'm sure you have. But, I'm not one to give the congressman political advice on how to deal with the media. But, if he did do that, he'd be in better shape. Because you're trying to you're trying to disguise and deflect, and that doesn't work over a long period of time.
Right.
People will just like to eventually it'll catch up with them. Yeah. And it has, I think.
I don't understand. I mean, to me, it's just mind-boggling that we have an elected congressman who just refuses flat out to engage 95% of the media. And I feel like when he does engage, it's, again, 2 sentences, but you can't ask a statement a question. And I think at this point, you're absolutely correct. There are a lot of questions that our delegate needs to answer.
But it's also the level of service and engagement with the public. It's not just with the media. It's the idea is that you present yourself to your public. The people of Guam elected him, and they haven't seen him, I think, in over almost 6 months. And what is in the meantime, Kilili Sablan, Congressman Sablan from the Northern Marianas, has gone back to Saipan twice.
And he's given out food. He's done stuff with the library. And I see it, and it's so easy to compare and to contrast when you see the CNMI's delegate. Like you said, he's been home multiple times. He's actually met with CNMI government leaders. Our Tomas Manglotnia covers those issues. So, we see the CNMI's delegate. But I want to ask you, because this is what our congressman will say, is he'll say that, Dr. Underwood is saying I'm not available. Well, whatever. I mean, anybody knows they can message me on Facebook, and I reply instantly. Is that the trade-off that we're dealing with? Because it kind of seems like Congressman San Nicolas likes to be over-present on Facebook, but absolutely AWOL in real life.
Well, Facebook is virtual reality, and then there's real reality. And the idea that you can't reach out and have a direct conversation with people, that you can avoid it and that you can substitute for that, is, in my estimation, just illogical and unresponsive, and breaks the bond between constituent and public servant.
Well, this is an election year. It is a Washington delegate seat is up for grabs. We heard from the new Democratic Party chair, Sarah Thomas Nedadog, last week. She plans on reaching out to Congressman San Nicolas, extend that olive branch. She didn't indicate that anybody else was expressed an interest to run on the Democrat side of the ballot. What sort of impact do you think news of this subcommittee investigation is going to have on the Democratic Party?
Well, I think it's electrifying, and electrifying could be exciting, and it could also shock you and kill you. So that's
a pretty wide range there.
It's saying that something is electrifying could have a number of multiple outcomes. Of course, people are going to take another look at this office, because the question really is how is Guam best represented in Washington, D.C., given this set of circumstances and the personal issues that the current congressman has? And they're not going away, you see. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, after the election, they're not going away. These issues are not going away. And so, people have to kind of make that assessment about what kind of representation they'd like.
So are we going to see you maybe filling out your candidacy?
Well, I was looking at that. To be honest with you, I was looking at the website over the weekend, and you have to get 500 signatures, and you have to turn them in by June 30th. Even in this environment, that's a kind of a chore. But I am, to be honest, I am thinking about it, but I haven't made that decision.
All right.
Let me just ask you: if someone is going to run and throw their hat in there and campaign against Delegate San Nicolas, what do you think? If I was doing it, I don't know where to start. I mean, do you just start that the seat is in question with the ethics investigation, or do you go with this guy doesn't show up to work, he doesn't vote, he doesn't show up, he's got the second worst voting record in the House? I mean, where do you start?
I think you start by saying that we need to restore the dignity of the office of the Washington delegate. We need to restore its dignity, because it is the only voice we have in Washington. And the quality of that voice, the dignity of that voice, the respectability of that voice covers all of us, and not just the current delegate. I think that's where you start. So all the other stuff, it's a part of like the back and forth. But, people have to understand that you have only one voice in Washington, D.C. that's there all the time. And so, do you want that to be a respected voice? Do you want that to be a voice that you can trust as a constituent and is respected and held in high regard in Washington, D.C.? That's where you would start.
All right. Well, there you go. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Wash your hands.
All right.
Stay
Okay.
safe.
8:13. Yeah, definitely very interesting. And I really wish we could get Delegate San Nicolas, because I feel like he's built it up in himself so big that maybe he's having anxiety about talking to KUAM. But I would just say that once you get it over with, it's pretty easy after that.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen it and we always say this, it's kind of pointless to avoid the media, because we're going to find you one way or another. I mean, Delegate Underwood is right. Congressman San Nicolas has to come back to Guam. And when he comes back to Guam, I guarantee you we're going to stick a camera in his face and ask him questions. It's just what we do in the media.
Mm-hmm.
But I really want to just again reach out to Congressman San Nicolas and want to fold his voice into all this, because the silence is deafening. I really hate to use that cliche, but it really is. And for him to say that this is normal, it just boggles my mind. And I asked Tomas, I said, well, can you ask him normal it is, because he said it was normal. Underwood said it's not, and we don't know. Anyway.
He also said this is electrifying.
I like
Wow.
that. It's either give you a nice little buzz or kill you. Hey, it's 8:14. We'll take a short break and come back with a dive into the day's COVID-19 headlines next on Containing COVID. Good morning.
Banners, posters,
Be healthy.
stickers, parcel
Keeping
or
you
photo-
informed, KUAM News brings you Banking 671, brought to you by the Bank of Guam, the People's Bank, and Coast 360 Federal Credit Union. Together, we thrive.
KUAM News COVID-19 Takeover